Hello, Simon and Robert. Welcome to Gems Radio podcast. Simon is the Chief Marketing Officer of Maybon. Robert is the CEO of Robert Tateossian and founder. Thank you for being part of Gems Radio.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about how you both bridge cultures, ecosystems. So tell me, Robert, how did your journey into design start?
Basically, I was a banker for about 7 years. I was working for Merrill Lynch. It was my first job out of university. I was in the city, and I was wearing, as all bankers in the city back then used to be, wear cufflinks every day. And at one point, I decided, enough of this corporate world. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be in the field of design. I don't want to be shuffling paperwork and responding to emails, making sure I CC every person before I send an email out. And I wanted to make a difference and leave some type of legacy. I saw an opportunity in the field of cufflinks because back then, cufflinks were quite traditional, quite boring in a way. They were the double-ended oval cufflinks that were monogrammed with the initials of your father or grandfather connected by a little chain in between. And I thought, why not make cufflinks something a little bit more fun? Just like you go into a store at the beginning of every season and you look at a new range of Hermes ties or buy your new shirts. Why can you not walk into a store and buy your new cufflinks? I saw an opportunity and I seized it. I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't have a family that I had to support, and I thought it was a risk that I could take, even though I had no background in design. So that's how the journey began, and thankfully, 35 years later, we're here today.
Okay, it's an incredible brand, and we're all supporters of Tateossian. Wearing one myself right now. Simon, the many hotels that you had worked with in the past, the ecosystem that you had created, creating a global footprint with the Maybon Group. What is the secret to creating quiet luxury by making the same impact as you do?
Well, I think the first of all is the context and your situation. So Maybon actually traces its roots back to the apex of Georgian society, right here in Mayfair. And we were actually born in Mayfair. And we're very lucky to be custodians of 3 storied hotels, Claridge's, the Connaught, and the Berkeley. And the Berkeley is now in Knightsbridge, but actually its originations were back in the 18th century as a coffee house, where artists and entertainers and writers and poets used to spend their time discussing how to win commissions from the aristocracy and the American industrialists and the European royalty. So right from the get-go, we were playing in this space, and our job in terms of how we leverage that is to distill it, codify it, and play it forward in a new context. And that brings me to the Emory Hotel, where we're sitting now, which is a hotel that's been open coming up 1 year, where we hope that we've done that justice. And I'm sure we'll get the chance to talk a little bit more about that later.
Speaking of the design mechanism of the Emory, you mentioned that there is an horlogerie concept that applies to it. Can you please elaborate more on that?
So we have a kind of philosophy in the way we work, and we do take it very seriously. So, I talked a little bit about the positioning of Maybon as a brand, and our purpose is to create stories of distinction in everything we do. So when we bring a new hotel to life, the first thing we do is we leverage the values of Maybon, creating stories, and we look at distinctiveness and art and craft and progression. And we look for that in our partners. So this hotel was actually created by Richard Rogers, a starchitect, the late, great Richard Rogers, and his partner, Ivan Harbour. And they were working in quite a small footprint and had to work out how to suspend this building above the Piccadilly line, the tube train that runs out under the hotel. You can't hear it, but they had to work this out. And we had access to their design notes and we could see this idea around the workings of a Swiss watch. A watch has its workings on the inside. This building has its workings on the outside. So that then gave us an idea, how can we leverage that in the positioning of the hotel? So we came up with the concept of horology, the study of time, the preciousness of time, and the idea of time well spent. So our duty here is to give our guests the gift of time, which is one of the most precious things that you have in life. And also the designers that we work with here, and we work with another 5 additional designers, as well as Richard Rogers and Ivan Harbour, have brought that to life in the physicality and the aesthetic that you're experiencing now.
Speaking of which, Robert, you also have watchmaking motif into your cufflinks and your work. Maybe clarify that a bit more about that.
Absolutely, and that's why it was a very interesting connection to have been made at the beginning of our chat here. So basically what launched me on the global scene was when I developed something called the watch cufflink. The idea was, again, obsession with time, that you would wear cufflinks with 2 watches, mini watches, one on the left side and one on the right side, and to keep time. Back then there were no mobile phones when I started. So just to keep time in New York versus London time. So that was originally the concept. But then eventually what I'm fascinated by is to, the concept of all, time, watches and the structure of watches. So I wanted to take the mechanism and share the mechanism and the inner workings of the mechanism and share it with people. So we started, we sourced these vintage watches from Ukraine, funnily enough. We open up the watches, we take the skeleton movement that's inside the watch, and we use that skeleton movement to make a cufflink, to make a pin, because I want to show people this is how a watch works, because most people have no idea what the inside of a watch looks like, or what a tourbillon looks like, or what watches look like. Most watches are covered up, so it's kind of like to share the inner workings, and that has become one of our key signatures over time.
Fantastic. Both of you are kind of architects of creating a new narrative globally and creating footprints internationally. How do you manage to create this kind of synergy in innovation, but at the same time not losing the soul of the actual product itself? You're in a world where you're innovating, but at the same time you have to keep the soul, the essence of the Maybon Group. So how do you manage to maintain that?
I think that's a brilliant question and not easy to answer. So I'll do the best. I think the first thing is this is a collective effort. So I'm very reliant on working with some brilliant minds in our organization across every aspect of the business. We don't refer to food and beverage. We call it the art of entertainment. And we really encourage everyone to bring forth the gifts that they have and share them with our customers. And for me as a marketeer and for my team, that creates stories and content that we obviously share with the audiences that we're talking to across many different mediums and channels. But more broadly, number one is being true to your purpose. Number two is creating a framework where people feel able to bring their story to life in the context of what they're doing, whether it's writing a social media post or preparing a VIP amenity for a guest across the whole spectrum. But the third thing is to do it in a unique way that relates to both the positioning of the hotel and the brand behind it. And that's quite obsessive and a compulsive business to be in. And I think winning for us is around creative expression and the reaction of the guest to what we are doing, minute by minute, day by day, month by month.
Robert, in a world of trends and keeping up with what's happening in fashion, how do you manage to retain a certain identity, which mashallah you've succeeded over the years? How does that happen? Because you have so many different markets that you're working with.
Well, I think first and foremost, what we try to do is, we try to be similar to, your experience, Simon. Is you have to be unique. You have to, every season when we're developing a collection, we want to make sure that whatever we're introducing is something that's special, something that sticks with the DNA of our brand. We don't follow fashion. Of course, you can't isolate fashion on what's happening on the high street, but something that has, that fits in with the values of Tateossian, and what our clients are looking for.
And what are the values of Tateossian?
So basically, the values are, number one, not creating something for the sake of creating something. It is something, providing the customers with something that's unique, something that's going to withstand the test of time. So it has to be something executed with beautiful craftsmanship. And it always has an element of surprise. There's no point of creating another piece of jewelry. Most customers walk into our store and they fall in love with the piece. Some people fly in from Heathrow and come straight to our store because they want to add another bracelet, or because they want to add wear another cufflink. Our jewelry makes people happy. So it's kind of staying true to those values and making people happy, giving something that's unique, that's beautifully crafted, that's going to stand the test of time. Which is why every season we have a new collection hopefully will tick all those boxes.
When I see Maybon, I think reverence. I think there's a sense of appreciation that you have just from the experience. Being able to create this kind of legacy is not easy. And you mentioned that you support the artists as well. What is the Maybon Group doing to support artists?
Well, look, thank you for asking. So, art is incredibly important to us, to the brand. It's actually a pillar of the brand. And if I just take Claridge's as an example, Claridge's has over 1,000 pieces of art, individual art within the building, including some Picassos, for example, and Damien Hirst. We also have an artist in residence at Claridge's, David Downton, who actually takes portraits of what I would call friends of Maybon, and their portraits are displayed in Claridge's. Claridge's also has a dedicated art space, a gallery space in the hotel, which is quite unusual. It's a gallery that we were running ourselves, and we work with a dedicated, I call her an art brain, who helped bring the gallery to life. But Periton from Paris have recently taken over that space and launched their first exhibition with the artist JR recently. We have the Art Space Cafe, where we offer coffee and a space for up-and-coming artists to spend time with us at preferential rates. But more importantly, we have a sponsorship of the Royal Academy of Arts, and we actually sponsor the school there and provide a reward on an annual basis that enables students to study there. So this is not funded by government, and is a very unique place. And I was very fortunate to spend time with the head of schools and to visit the schools and to talk to the artists there and actually see the beneficiary, of that art prize that we sponsor. We do more than that, but it just gives you a feel for how...
And quite a community that you're also building through the artist community as well.
It is, and obviously art does bring people together, and challenges your way of thinking, and art is all about expression from a personal viewpoint. So to be part of that is very, very special. And then obviously it's also commercial. So, I'll be frank, I'm always thinking of a business context. We run a business, and Frieze is another very important partner. It's a big part of the calendar in London, and to have a relationship both here and in Los Angeles, where we have the Maybon Beverly Hills, and we also partner with Frieze there. is also part of our activation over the course of the year.
So Maybon, Beverly Hills, and there's also the Riviera. And what are the other properties that you also have?
So currently we have 4 hotels in London: Claridge's, the Connaught, the Berkeley, and the recently opened the Emory. And then we have our 2 sisters, the Maybon Beverly Hills and the Maybon Riviera. And we've just recently announced the Maybon Saint-Germain in Paris, which is due to open in 2027. And we are also building out a pipeline of hotels in some of those key global gateway cities.
Any time in the Middle East?
Inshallah.
Yes.
Obviously, the Middle East is an incredibly important region. And there's a couple of reasons for that. You know, from a customer perspective, we have many Middle Eastern guests who come and spend time in our hotels on an annual basis. So yes, we'd be very keen to open Maybon hotels within the region in the near term.
I look forward to it. Robert, your process of gathering gems, and you have very authentic way of looking about it. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So going back to every season, having that element of surprise. So basically, I travel around the world looking for that unusual thing. So when I buy something from a dealer, it tends to be something that's been sitting with him for the longest time. Or if something is very weird or unusual, they're like, oh, Robert Tateossian is going to buy this. So things that we introduce, for example, that we're introducing this season, I love working with meteorites, something that comes from out of space, because having a meteorite in a cufflink or a piece of jewelry is so it's intriguing. So we have a piece of the moon, we have a piece of Mars, that's so you have a piece of space that you're wearing, something, and it goes back to this whole notion of whatever you're wearing is about you. It makes you unique, it makes you individual. We don't do big production runs. Other pieces that we've sourced are dinosaur bones. So we're doing them, cutting them into pendants and cufflinks. I've also, the theme for this season is marine. So I've come across these corals that are petrified corals that are literally hundreds of millions of years old. So each piece is completely unique. So I'm always on the search for things that are unusual. I'm trying to show our customers or people who enjoy, it kind of like links up with art. I mean, we're trying to create something that's not just another piece of jewelry, but a piece of art. Or stones, for example, stones that are in their raw format. So it's a sapphire, a ruby in a raw format. People will look at a stone and say, what is this red stone? Because usually people think of rubies as polished stones, or emeralds as polished stones, or sapphires as polished stones, or diamonds as polished stones. I like to show the organic. I like to show the raw side of things. I like to show the watches not as a finished watch. I like to show the inside mechanism of a watch. So it's always this showing what's different, so that the person who's making that purchase is buying something that is very special, very, very unique, that they will not find anywhere, that tells a story. And we're trying to weave the story, and we're trying to share the story with our clients to give them something that's very special.
They call you the king of cufflinks, but then you also dress the king himself. So how did that happen?
So basically, that was a term that was coined many, many years ago, because we started with cufflinks, again,
as modest as always, Robert.
And we started with cufflinks, and of course, cufflinks used to represent 95% of our turnover. But that's back then, when there was no casual dressing, and where, if you're sitting in any type of meetings in the city of London, or if you're a part of a board or you're a CEO, you just wear cufflinks. I mean, I'm not wearing cufflinks today, but as we know, things have changed dramatically, especially with post-COVID. Actually, even before COVID, where it's the whole dressing down started happening. So I'm like, better start changing tack here, otherwise I'm gonna have have to close my doors. But no, jokes aside, really our main market originally was Japan.
Those are worn all over the world, and they're very popular. So.
Yeah. So the Japanese love jewelry. The Japanese have an affinity with England because we were both islands, and the Japanese are incredibly loyal as clients. So they started buying my cufflinks, and they're little boutiques. And they're like, Robert, instead of just cufflinks, why don't you just give us some bracelets? Why don't you give us some necklaces? So really, it's the Japanese that kind of like pushed me to develop other lines of jewelry. And it's you always have to listen to your clients when you are developing something. And again, it goes back to don't create something just for the sake of create something because you're being requested. You're listening to your audience. And so little by little I started creating bracelets and necklaces because my Japanese clients wanted it. Back then Chrome Hearts was the only real brand of jewelry, and we're much more minimal, cleaner look than Chrome Hearts. We're not heavy silver. And that's how we started doing bracelets, and started slightly diversifying from the cufflinks into a full line of men's jewelry and women's jewelry.
And you're sold in how many countries, mashallah?
We are in about 40 countries around the world, and I like to believe we sell in the best store in every city around the world. So what is the best store in Tokyo or New York? Our line should be present there.
It's a predominantly men's brand, but it's nice to also see that men also get some perks. And thanks to you, we get these perks. But you also have a lot of beautiful women's stuff.
Yeah, the women's I carry in my store in Mayfair, and I decided not to wholesale the women's collection, just because there are so many girls out there with their jewelry lines, and there's no point to compete with so many people on a local level. And I think it's best to always have your niche, focus on one thing, and be the best in the world at what you do. And that was always my premise from day one in terms of how I developed my business. I want to focus on men's jewelry and hopefully be one of the best ones in the world doing what I'm doing. And it's always a search for excellence and delivering that throughout the process.
What are the intangibles that the Maybon Group have that you can identify that people can't see? I mean, it's about celebrating the unidentifiable. What's what you can't see? In a world of social media, everything is visible. The beauty of a hotel is you can create this quiet impact of luxury and service. So what is...
Another really, really thoughtful question. For me, it's about a threshold moment. So when you walk in, I'm sure to your store, in our case, when you walk into a hotel, you start to feel differently, right? It has an impact on you. It's sensorial. It's what you're seeing, what you're hearing, the light, the time of day, the theatre, the backdrop. But the most important thing is we're the backdrop to you and your experience, right? You have a reason for being here. You have your own purpose, and our job is to facilitate that the best way we can. So our primary focus is always on the guest, number one. And our job is to facilitate that experience better than anyone else. And there's a lot that goes into that. In terms of describing the indescribable, that intangible feeling, the listeners to the podcast know when we've got it right. It makes you feel a different way, and you're happy to pay a premium for that feeling. It's an exchange of value, depending on your own perception. Beyond that, I do feel it comes down to some creators. There's one I'd like to mention. There's a lady called Michelle Wu, who is our global head of design. I think it's quite unusual to have a design shop in-house. And we're very fortunate to have Michelle because she's the essence of the brand in a design context. And even when we're working with other designers, Michelle will always sew in that teal thread of Maybon, and I can tell it, myself.
Signature.
I can see some of those signatures brought to life. So we'll never be a cookie cutter chain. We're not interested in slapping our logo across multiple properties all over the world. That's not our business model. But we do believe in creating an essence of the brand and bringing that to life across every aspect of hospitality.
Robert, when you first started, what kind of statement did you want to make with Tateossian? What is your mission?
I wanted to make sure that whatever we're delivering to our customers is something that is going to stand the test of time. So that, if you're buying a piece of Tateossian jewelry, it's going to be something that's timeless. It's going to be something that's an heirloom. It's going to be something that tells a story about yourself, and something that is going to make you stand out, make you somebody special. So when I'm thinking of why people come to us, those are the main things we think of, and of course we also want to be proud as to how these pieces are made, and making sure that it's created in a sustainable way, that you're proud on how it was manufactured. You're working with craftsmen. You're supporting craftsmen around the world, because in many ways
you're building cultural bridges as well.
In many ways, you have to make sure that you're continuing, this legacy, of all these little artisans that are, whether mostly based in Italy, who otherwise would be dying. I have an example of, one of the most beautiful ateliers that I work with just outside Florence, that make beautiful sterling silver boxes. Who buys a sterling silver box these days that weighs half a kilo, or who buys a pitcher in sterling silver? And the son of the artisan had to go become a bus driver because they were not getting enough business to create these beautiful, in this case it was objet d'art. These are like pieces that you would have in your home. They're not jewelry pieces, but like that, there's a lot of artisans that are we like to create that community, support our workshops, and create something that we're going to be proud of, and in the way it's been made, and also the person who's received it is going to be very happy wearing that piece.
The Maybon Group legacy. What do we have to expect? What do we have to look forward to?
I think just talk a little bit, if I may, about the sort of Connaught Hotel.
Of course,
and the Connaught traces its roots back to 1815, and it's now going through a very sensitive restoration. So the Connaught was the home to the English aristocracy, who could no longer afford to live in Mayfair because the original townhouses were knocked down and bigger homes were built for the industrial age and the railway barons from America and European commercial enterprises and the royal family. So these people still needed a home, and the Connaught became their home. So we call it, we live with our history, but we don't live in it. So the Connaught's modern day context comes in the lighting, the switching, because we don't want you to worry about the hygiene factors, the heated floors in the bathroom, the Toto lavatories, right? So you need to bring that functionality into a modern day context. When you walk into a suite, it needs to work for you and your personal preferences. But we do not want to lose what we talked about earlier, that the essence, the culture, the ingrained sensibility within that hotel. So we call that a rare belonging, and we will never let that go. The Berkeley that moved from Mayfair to Knightsbridge in the 1970s was a new build. So you have to start again to a degree. So the way we protected the essence of that hotel and played it forward was through this idea around cultural refinement, and you mentioned it earlier. So we've created a cosmopolitan environment at the Barclay. So it's very deliberate that we have opened Le Mans and brought the French Riviera into the hotel.
It's one of your new restaurants at the Berkeley, right?
Yes, exactly. It's very deliberate, our relationship with Cedric Grolet from Paris, bringing him and his excellence to London.
I'm literally addicted to Cedric
A lot
Grolet,
of
and I
people-
refuse to have dessert anywhere else but at the cafe downstairs.
A lot of people are. So we're the perfect intersection of cultural excellence. So those people tend to have a singular vision, like Robert was talking about for his brand, and that plays out in, as I said, in design and the art of entertainment and the feel that you have. So looking forward, we're aware of trends. Obviously, we're particularly mindful of demographics and changing demographics and what's happening in the world of wealth and that transfer of wealth. We need to be relevant to a younger generation. We're not relying on the past to create our future, but we're very respectful of it. And personally, I believe in universal truths. I believe people share a passion for beauty, for art, for culture. I think most people have the fundamental respect for people and place wherever it is in the world. But more importantly, I think we live in an age of technology, but we also live in an age of humanity, and a desire for human connection will be ever present. So, I'm very open to the robot cleaning the room, but there'll always be a butler in Maybon servicing the needs of the guest. And in my mind, that will always be a human being.
So it's not going to be the Jetsons anytime soon. Okay, that's great. Robert, just to kind of close a few more questions. Who are the people that inspired you to become a designer? The people that inspired you the most?
To be very frank, when I didn't know I was going to become a designer. I started my line and thought, okay, I think to
you were in finance
to launch a line, to be a designer, you have to have what's called a sense of the aesthetic. That's something that you're born with. I don't think that's something that you can learn. And I was lucky enough to grow up in Rome, and I think Rome is such a quintessentially artistic place. And growing up, I was visiting all the fashion boutiques with my mother, going shopping for shoes and handbags for her and her girlfriends. And I think that's what really formed me. But of course, I do have great respect for many artists, because art is such an intrinsic part of jewelry making. And probably someone who I have great respect for, and someone whom we have a collaboration with, bless her, is Zaha Hadid. I have great respect for Zaha, because she is such an iconic woman, because she tried to push the boundaries of design as much as possible in her architecture and in her designs.
Held her own globally as well.
And that's what we try to do, in the sense, like, whenever I'm designing something, I'm really trying to push the boundaries of design. I always speak to my workshops, and that's why I have a little bit of difficulty working in the UK, because they say that's not possible. That's not possible. It's never been done before. And my answer is, well, if it's never been done before, that's precisely why I want to do it. Italians tend to be a little bit more adventurous and will give things a try once, twice, 3 times until they find a solution. And so I think, in terms of, if I'm thinking of an artist or someone in my mind, like, who really stands out, I would say Zaha, because, I really respect her designs, and that's why we have this license for her jewelry. And, when she passed away, her studio contacted me and said that was one of her wishes before she passed away. Will you consider it? And we have the Zaha collection that we've developed with the studio.
That's amazing.
And it was incredibly difficult to execute because Zaha's designs are very, very complicated and very difficult to translate into jewelry, but we succeeded, and we have a small capsule collection with her.
Amazing.
Simon, getting into the marketing world, was there anyone that you aspired to kind of say that someone who was exemplary before you started?
Yes, I mean, you draw influence from a number of people. I was particularly inspired by, and when Angela Ahrens was at Burberry with Christian May, I think that was a moment in time for the Burberry brand, and it was what I would call a brand reinvention. I'm British, so I am passionate about British luxury brands. And to your point about Italy, I've kind of been surprised that there hasn't been a British brand that's kind of transcended its category and gone beyond its sector. And I felt Burberry had that opportunity with Angela Ahrens, but I wasn't surprised that she then went off to Apple and created that incredible retail sense-experience that you feel when you walk into an Apple store, and no one's really been able to replicate that. And it obviously does relate back to Steve Jobs' vision and then Jonathan Ive's design intent. So that certainly is something that's moved me and motivated myself and Roland Fazell, who is the chief operating officer here at Maybon, to think beyond the category. Also, the practitioners that you get to work with. We've recently launched Seren, where serenity meets energy, which is our well-being and longevity brand. There's 4 floors of wellness below the Emory Hotel, which is quite incredible.
And the spa's supposed to be amazing too.
Well, yes, and it's really sort of going beyond the spa. So that we work with, we called them the wellness bros. You've got the tech bros, and in the hotel world, you used to have we still have the top drawer chefs of the world. We're very lucky to have a relationship with Jean-Georges von Gerechten and Helen de Rose at the Connaught. So it used to be all about the chefs, then it was about the DJs. Now it's about the patissiers, the Cedric Grolets. But more recently, the trend is well-being. We want to live forever. So having the opportunity to study the works of some of the leaders in well-being and look at the protocols they're creating and the books that they're writing to enable all of us to live I think the term is health span, and to bring that to life in a brand, a standalone brand called Seren, was very, very exciting, and kind of big part of our thinking moving forward.
I want to mention an anecdote about how forward-thinking Angela was, because I was lucky to be invited as part of a small breakfast group of executives and business owners, and because she was trying to create that community for people to brainstorm. And she had different presentations from different people on what was happening in society back then. And this one guy comes up and says, oh, cryptocurrencies, we're talking 15 years ago, wow. Cryptocurrency is the next thing. We have this thing called the Bitcoin, and I'll never forget to this day, Bitcoin was at $100. One Bitcoin today is 40,000. So how did I listen? And the guy said, oh, this is going to be the future. I thought, really? And then the other thing they were talking about is robots that are going to be cleaning your rooms. And of course, everything that, she brought on that breakfast, I should have paid a lot more attention, happened. So she was very forward thinking as a woman.
But speaking of AI and creativity, do you think that creativity will take over with AI? Or?
I don't think AI is going to take over the role of the creative mind. I think it's going to supplement the process, the creative process. Luckily, I've played the game with AI, and with my team has inputted all these, saying that this is Tateossian, who it is today. We're trying to develop the spring-summer collection. Show us what what we should be doing. And the stuff that came out was not really usable, but it was interesting.
It's a tool.
It's a tool. And I definitely use it to, to address questions that I have about everyday life. But in terms of the creative process, I think we're still far away. It'll be interesting to see how we can use it for photography, for the lookbook, for example, that we're working on, because I want to juxtapose the pictures against a London skyline, unless I get usage of this beautiful suite to do the photo shoot. But no, because we're always a London brand, and I want to create that London feeling. So it'll be interesting to see if AI can, fuse that with the images to give that London feel and juxtapose things. But yeah, it's the way of the future. You can't ignore it, and it's going to be intrinsic part of any business or anyone's life moving forward.
I think just like Simon mentioned, the human touch is integral, and that's the new luxury now. It's like,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're looking for the best of both worlds. And for us, to leverage AI to improve workflow and make us more efficient and give back time is a key part of our strategy, and in terms of marketing technology and building out a digital platform. And to get to know our customers even better, that's very important.
A great tool, but within limits.
Within limits, and but on the creative side, Seren, we leveraged AI a lot. One of the themes of Seren is the power of potent plants. So we use that to create imagery to bring this brand to life digitally, and you actually see it in the visual identity of Seren. But conversely, I've just reshot Claridge's and the Connaught and the Berkeley and and I've used Kensington Laverne, a up-and-coming society photographer recognized by Architectural Digest, and it was a brilliant move. And the way he shot the hotels is far superior to what we had before. I don't see how the machine is really going to be able to capture that. So in a perfect world, it will be the best of both worlds for us. Yeah.
Speaking of something that can never be replaced with humans is authenticity. This is a signature question that we always ask, usually our last question with the podcast. Robert, what is authenticity to you?
Authenticity is staying true to yourself. Of course, you can evolve with time, but just reminding yourself, why am I doing this? What are the values that are important to us? Are we sticking to it, or are we just doing something just for the sake of doing something? So, for example, before we launch a collection, we sit around a table. We have all the jewelry pieces on the table, and we look at every single piece, even though we've done the sample, and say, do we really need this? Does the world need another, bracelet that looks like that? Or is this something that's going to make a difference? Is this something that's different enough? Does it, fit into those boxes that we've said are important to us as a brand? So that is, many definitions of authenticity, but at least for us, that's one of the most important one.
Thank you. Simon?
Well, definitely being true to self and real is what I tend to call it with the team. But I think it goes beyond that. I think it gives you permission to be playful and to take some risk and activate what you're doing without limits. And as long as you're rooting that within your brand, your vision, your purpose, you'll be fine, and people will relate to it. And I think in our context of when we're opening up a new hotel in a new destination, we realize that we haven't been there for 200 years. So what we do is really dig deep into the culture, the spirit, the vibe of the place that we're coming into, and study it. And this sounds a little odd maybe, but we will literally buy every single book that's ever been written about that place. I mean, that's what we're doing in Saint-Germain. And we're reading those books. And we're building...
And when is the opening?
That in 2027. But we're actually already pre-selling Our Maybon residence is Saint-Germain on Rue Saint-Dominique and Rue Université today. So if I may plug those, if you go to maybonresidencessaintgermain.com, you will see how we're telling that story for the next generation of our customers in Paris.
It's a lovely area. I grew up on Avenue Bosquet.
I wish I did.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you both for being part of the Jumblebee podcast. It's a pleasure having you.
It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you Hatem, for your time.
It's my pleasure.
And inspiring questions.
Thank you. And Simon, thank you for making this happen. This gorgeous location here. Really incredible.
Always a pleasure to host you. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.